Sabina Araya?
We'll promote her to participant.
Okay, that would be good. And that may have been the comment or question. Okay. With that, if we don't have any public comment, we'll go to the CEO's report. Also, I think 3 minutes. No.
I can. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome back to the chairmanship. We're delighted to have you. I can beat the 3-minute standard. I have only one item to report this afternoon, which is, if you saw my email yesterday afternoon, we had a surprise and very welcome visit yesterday by Senator Patty Murray, who was home on congressional recess. And she, as you know, did the heavy lifting to secure an earmark for us for the design of the Gold Line project. And she wanted to swing by and get an update on that project, and also to hear about some of the other things that we're doing with our safety and security program, with ZIP, and a few other odds and ends. So it came together on short notice, but she spent about an hour with us, got to tour the electric bus and hear what we're up to, and we had a really nice visit. So and we had an opportunity, obviously, to thank her for her support of the agency and the project. So a good day yesterday. And with that, I'll conclude my report.
All right. Well, it's great, and very nice that we were able to accommodate her in and thank her. That was very nice. All right, we're going to have a presentation, integrated service planning, and that's also you.
Back to me to kick it off. So we are excited today to introduce for the board a new approach to how we're going to plan service in the future. And so I'm just going to set a little bit of context and then ask the team to come up and walk you through it. So we are here in 2026, about a year and a half removed from the opening of light rail in 2024 in Linwood. The board adopted the 2024 and beyond network plan in 2023 in preparation for that. And over the course of 2024, when we started in March with the opening of the Orange Line and the major structural changes to our network in the fall of that year, and then continuing through last year and a little bit this year, we are delivering the last few elements of service growth that came with that 2024 and beyond network plan. So we've still got a little bit to go in terms of completing that work. And as we are on the sort of headed toward the finish line with that, we are beginning to turn our sights to planning for the future of service growth across the county. And so that's a process that typically is long lead and includes a significant public engagement component. It's a conversation with the PTBA communities about how they want to see service grow in the future. It's also an opportunity for us to incorporate what we're learning from all of the change that we implemented over the last couple of years and continue to challenge ourselves to get better at meeting our customers' needs. So the big difference this time over how we've traditionally planned service in the past is that we are beginning to integrate the microtransit mode into our system planning. We've been piloting microtransit as an experiment the last couple of years. We are learning a ton. And we're seeing obviously how our customers are responding to it in a favorable way. And we're starting to see where we can use that mode not only to serve highly local trips, but also to leverage higher performance with the fixed route bus network. So, you know, we're in this transition now, moving away from piloting microtransit on a spot basis here and there around the PTBA to looking at it more systematically and trying to figure out how to optimally integrate it with our bus network. So that's the big change in how we're going about planning service in the future. And we're excited to show you that today. So this is the start of a process, the start of a conversation about how we're going to go forward, and you'll be hearing about it off and on over the course of the next year. We're going to start with a report on how the pilot areas are going in the ZIP mode. So it's been a little over a year since we launched Arlington and Lake Stevens and Darrington, and so we've got a ton of data to share with you about what that year has produced in terms of mobility. The Finance Committee in the prior hour got an overall year-end system report and got the aggregate look at how Zip performed in 2025. And Jennifer is gonna go area by area and show you the details of how each has gone as well. So that'll put some data on the table for you to sort of think about as Matthew then walks through how we're going to approach system planning overall and try to begin incorporating that learning into our planning approach. So it's a Transit Geeks holiday today, so we're hopeful that you'll find it as stimulating and interesting as we do. And with that, I'll conclude and ask the team to come up and give the presentation.
Hardest part, so always turn on the microphone. Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Main. I am the Director of Product and Service Innovation within the Customer Experience Department. And thank you, Rick, for that intro. I'm going to be starting the presentation talking about how the pilots are doing in Arlington and Lake Stevens and Darrington and what we're learning in those areas. Maybe. Oh, it's the side. Oh. Hang on, almost. What am I doing wrong? Oh, okay, I got it. Sorry. So I think it's important to spend a little bit of time just talking about Zip Shuttle and where we started and why we started it. We really designed this service around community need and what individuals needed who lived within these areas and also for those that traveled through the areas. It's really meant to give access to transportation for people who may not be able to use some of our other options, like, for instance, the bus, especially people who may have a disability or seniors or youth, just because it does provide more of a door-to-door flexibility. And people are able to use the service on an on-demand basis where they can call and secure their ride when they need it during the service span. So these are actually some pictures of real customers. On the left, that is a student that goes to Edmonds College in Linwood. And in the middle, believe that's from maybe our zone in Arlington, one of our seniors using the service with one of our drivers. And then also on the right-hand side is another actual customer. So it's fun to actually see the people that are riding and using the service. And it's really important also that we've learned through Zip Shuttle that many of the customers that use the service are also able to expand farther outside of the zone areas and connect to our bus network and be able to travel farther. So it's a good integration that we found between microtransit and the bus. So this is the picture of the 4 zones that we have in operation. On the far left, I'll start back, go back in history just a little bit. So if we look at Alderwood, that was the very first zone we designed. We launched a pilot back there in fall of 2022 and operated it for about a 12-month period, went through a process to make a recommendation to move that from a pilot to regular service. So it has been operating since fall of 2023 in that regular service mode. And then right in the middle of December 2024, we launched zones in Arlington, Darrington, and Lake Stevens. And as I mentioned before, there is a lot of community engagement and involvement that we go into in designing these services. So we were in each of these cities the better part of a year, working very intensely with community members, business leaders, both through focus groups and engagement surveys, really making sure we had zone boundaries correct, the span of service was right on, we had all the key destinations included. So when we got ready to launch, it was really hitting home that this was a service that people understood, they knew how to use it, and it would fit the needs that they have. And that's what we're seeing in the results. So we wrapped up our first 12 months right in December of last year, and you'll see we're really pleased with the results. So if we start in that first column, the 2025 boardings goal, when we started the zones, we were hoping that all 4 together would get to about 212,000 boardings. you'll see that we exceeded that by just about 42% by year end. And if we look just individually at Arlington, Darrington, Lake Stevens, they all surpassed their initial boarding goals quite dramatically as well. And we set those not overly conservative. We base them off of Alderwood's performance, which is a very different environment than Arlington, Darrington, and Lake Stevens. And so we were very pleased at how well the service did in those areas. And then if we look at customers, we were hoping to get, about 4,200 customers that were using the services, and we literally doubled that. And then if we look just at the pilot areas, they all almost, if Darrington had been a little bit higher, almost doubled those as well. So we found that we have a lot of people that are using the service. We have some customers that have taken hundreds and hundreds of trips on the service. And as I mentioned before, one of the nice things that we like to promote and think about when we talk about microtransit is its connectivity to fixed route. And we've seen that in the data. Across the zones, we have about 24% of the boardings that are transferring to a fixed route service or coming from that, which is really great. We are really surprised when we look at Arlington and Lake Stevens, which many of us don't automatically think have the highest level of fixed route service compared to some other areas, but people are using it specifically at the transit centers to connect to the bus, and they're using Zip Shuttle to get them there. So we're very pleased about that. The 24%, I will mention, though, only includes Orca taps. It doesn't capture people who may be paying through the app, like a debit or credit card, or youth who ride for free. So that number could potentially be higher, but we're only able to capture it this way currently with Orca taps, unless we're doing customer surveys, and then we can ask for how they board at those times. We are continuing to learn a lot about microtransit. We've only been in it for about 3 years, and it's a fascinating service space to be in. As I mentioned, it is very complementary to the bus. That was a goal we've always had, even when we started Alderwood, is helping people connect farther beyond the zone, in addition to serving those shorter trips within zones. And again, almost a quarter of those trips are connecting to the bus. We're finding that it is really hitting the goal of filling different needs for people. Again, when we did engagement and we talked to communities and talked to community members, we really understood what their needs were. Like, do I need to get to a doctor appointment or a grocery store, or does my child need to get home after a school activity? And so we made sure that the service zone and the boundary allowed for those destinations to be included, and the span of service operated so people would have time in the day to be able to take those trips. And we found that it's working well across all sizes of communities and all types of communities, whether it's very rural, like in Darrington, more suburban, like Arlington or Lake Stevens, and then Alderwood, which is more of an urban environment. So we're really trying to stretch and test as much as we can in these first 3 pilots we're doing now, and then initially with the Alderwood pilot, to learn and gather as much data as we can about how microtransit is operating. We do see a lot of youth riding both in Arlington, Lake Stevens, and Darrington. They all have high schools. Some have more than one high school within the zone. We have learned that it is really helpful, though, for families who need that for their kids to be able to have maybe extracurricular activities. Maybe it's a home that only has one car. Maybe it's kids who are choosing not to have a license because they may have different means of whether or not able to do that. We have a lot of nice personal stories about how it has helped both families and youth by able to having access to the service. So that's also one of the things we're trying to balance and learn about is, are we making the service still available for every audience and everyone has access to it? So seniors and people with disabilities and adults and youth is like, do we have enough service here so everyone has access and can take it? As I mentioned in the engagement period, when we were out in each community for about a year doing that work, we formed community working groups. There were about 12 to 14 people within each city and represented business and community leaders. And they are the ones that really kind of did the nuts and bolts and helped us design the services. They helped us push surveys. They helped us do engagement events. And they were key in helping us really design the service. That was a very effective tool that we had. And I think it's a very important thing we've learned as an agency, and hopefully we can carry that forward, that type of engagement as we design further services and as we go forward in this path of planning fixed route and microtransit together, because there was a lot of really key learnings of having that engagement and understanding of community need. And as I mentioned earlier, like we're still learning a ton. We have peer agencies that have been doing this for over a decade and are coming to us to learn, like, how are you doing this so well? And we go to them to learn, like, what are you doing? It's very much an environment across the country where people are still trying to figure out how it all works perfectly. So we're, it's exciting, it's fun. We're learning, we're being proactive, we're really focusing on customer experience and efficiency in operating the service and where the marriage of those two come together best. So looking at next steps, kind of going from left to right. So we're kind of currently now in the manage and optimize operations. We're continuing to provide service, good customer experience, try and keep efficiency really high as far as, boardings per trip. I mentioned that we are just wrapping up a year worth of service. That's the traditional time period we have for a pilot. So we'll now be moving forward into the next phase, which is service evaluation. That's a process that we go through with our labor union to look at evaluating service within each zone. This is a normal process we do when we look at moving something from a pilot service to a regular service. And then we take that information and we combined it with all of the performance and analytical data that we have from how we know the service operates. And we wrap that up into a formal recommendation of should this service should this zone, these services move forward to regular service. A very similar process that we did with Alderwood. So the timing of this is TBD exactly, but anticipating this will be done in 2026. I'm happy to take any questions now before we move to service planning, or we can do it at the end. Either way is fine.
All right, any questions of Jennifer on the? You have one?
Well, I have so many.
Yeah, well, you start with the top one and move on to,
So
Councilmember.
I turn this on.
Yeah, there you go. That just goes green.
So I noticed that a lot of the students are using this, which I understand is a great service because the parents can't be all these places at once. So, and you mentioned that some of these areas in service has 2 high schools. So when you put the map together, did you look at the points where people, so you did add the high schools in there?
Yes, essentially for the 3 cities, as well, specifically Arlington and Lake Stevens, the zone boundary is almost essentially like city proper boundaries. Doesn't include like incorporated areas of the city, but it's the true almost city boundary. Each zone, Lake Stevens is around 12 square miles, Arlington is around 10 square miles. And we intentionally included the high schools because we also wanted to test that and see, we didn't have a high school in Alderwood, so we wanted to see what that would do. And we found that while a lot of them are using it, they often group together and ride, which is great. We have about nearly almost 50% of our trips across all 4 zones are shared. So we have multiple people in the vehicles, which really helps with our efficiency. And we've learned that we've heard just amazing stories from teachers who have students where maybe they're unhoused and they weren't able to get to school and now they can get to school, all the way from parents who can't do the after school sport, or my child is choosing not to have a license. So this is why they'd like to use the service. So I think we were a little wondering how it would go with youth and, would it overtake the system? Would we not be able to continue to provide service at the level we want? And we've really seen that we've still been able to deliver a strong customer experience. While youth represents about 45 to 70% of trips across Arlington, Lake Stevens, and Darrington. So it is a strong ridership within each of those 3 zones.
Wonderful. And I have one more. So with the seniors, obviously they probably need rides to shopping and to medical places. So have we looked at the map to see where they live and where the clinics are and so forth, so that they can use this? And do you have special vans that take wheelchairs too?
Yes, all such good questions. So when we do the engagement with the cities and are literally sitting down with maps and like drawing boundaries with the community members, those are the things in the inputs we look for is like, where do people need to go within this space? Like, is it a grocery store? Is it a medical clinic? And is it a DSHS, like social service office? So we try and encompass as many of those key destinations as we can within that space.
Right.
And what was the second? Sorry, Mrs.
Well,
You had a second part to that.
oh,
Yes.
the van.
So, we do have, vans within the fleet. I think it's about 60% of our fleet has wheelchair accessibility in the vans. So when someone requests their ride, they indicate that, and then that van is assigned to pick that person up.
And one of the reasons why I asked that is because the current system, apparently it's a long wait to get a van that will hold a wheelchair. So yes.
Oh, for
yes,
paratrans, for DART, yes.
right.
And we found a lot of the people that live in the zones that are current, like DART paratransit customers, organically kind of found the service, and we've recently marketed them also information so then they can access the service, but have a very positive experience usually because it is a very short wait time versus what their experience in paratransit may be. And so I think within the 4 zones, it represents about 4 to 5% of like paratransit trips. Because again, most paratransit trips are very long, but we welcome those customers to be able to use Zip Shuttle if it creates a much better experience for them.
Great. I can see lots of more possibilities with this service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Raya.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to give a shout out to the team that came to present at Lake Stevens City Council late last year. Lake Stevens has been incredibly happy with a pilot program and they're very excited about the service. So the hope is that it'll remain. There was some concerns about wait times and prioritization of seniors versus high schoolers at certain time of day. So curious to know more about how that will work in the future. And a question about it. Do we have a cost per trip to kind of versus fixed route? Do we know? I'm curious on what is the price of a trip on Zip versus regular fixed route?
That's a great question. So, it averages about $19 to $22 per boarding for Zip, kind of looking across the zones. It's a little bit higher if we factor in Darrington, just because it is a less efficient service area just by design. It's a little over $40 a trip. But if we stay in that kind of $19 to $21 range, that's very comparable to fixed route in each of those, like Arlington, Lake Stevens, and Alderwood areas. They range around $20 to $23. I think the difference is when we look at fixed route, that's a cost per boarding that encompasses the entire length of the route versus just what's traveling within the zone. So we've been looking analytically to maybe shift to more of a like cost per mile when doing those comparisons between fixed route and microtransit to get more of an apples to apples comparison. But a good industry standard is trying to have your microtransit be fairly comparable in cost to your fixed route, which is what we're seeing.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's good to know.
All right. And that was going to be a question I was going to ask. So very good. Thank you. Also, you said you put together about a dozen people a year before kind of to help you plan the route and the corridor and all of that. Did you keep them and reach out to them during, because I think that would be valuable, right? So excellent. And they're probably still can call on them now. And
Yes, that's why we keep them engaged because they're just such a valuable resource for us, and they know their communities best. And so just like we get to collect feedback from customers and take action, we collect feedback and thoughts from them as well and bring that into design. I mean, we're piloting, so we always want to be agile and see if we can make changes in there, like ear on the ground. So it's a great place. We try to at least quarterly check in with them and let them know, here's how the pilot's doing. What are you hearing? If we're doing any kind of like special push or promotion about something, we reach out to them because they're the reasons we had such great success with like community surveys, like response rates, 40, 50%, like it, which you just don't ever hear from. But people trust the source that they get the information from, and they were really great in helping us do that.
Right. Well, thank you. Any further questions? We'll move. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon. Matthew Muller, Director of Planning. So before we dive into a discussion on the process of service planning, I think it's helpful to have some context of the activities that have been occurring over the last couple years. And so as Rick mentioned and Jennifer mentioned, there's been a tremendous amount of growth. We've been working on really restructuring our entire network since 2024 around the introduction of light rail into Snohomish County. And so to date, we've added almost or more than 100,000 service hours and operate more service than we did before the pandemic. During this window, we also added Zip Alderwood to our regular service portfolio and launched 3 new zones in a diverse array of locations and operate over 100,000 Zip hours. And so, as you can imagine, with all of this growth, there's been a lot of learning, a lot of maturation and how we understand how people are responding to all of these changes, and the community itself continues to develop in the way it travels coming out of the pandemic and the expectations for how transit can serve them. And so the framework that we will be going over kind of reflects all of this activity and all of this learning, and really the work that Jennifer's team and my team have been doing together to figure out what signals we're receiving, what lessons we are learning from each of our 2 kind of dominant service modes, and trying to unify them as we think about, what does our service look like in the future. So, all right. So this slide, we'll be returning to it and showing snapshots of it as we progress through the discussion, but ultimately, we think of the process that we follow as kind of embodied in 5 simple steps that form a feedback loop. Like many processes, it starts with goal formation. There we go. For us, that largely is embodied in our mission and vision. But then from there, just kind of distilling that down into descriptive adjectives and verbs. It's really coming up with services that are relevant and attractive to the community. And so that really gets at understanding how people are traveling and going where they need to go, going at the times that they need to go there, doing it in a manner that's affordable, that's competitive time-wise to other options. But doing that within the constraints that any kind of public agency faces, whether it's resource constraints, funding, staff, equipment, or it's just the operating environment that we serve. Those all kind of shape ultimately what we are able to do when we start to develop plans to fulfill our goals. One thing to keep in mind is that really we have at any time kind of 3 planning cycles that are going on, and that the framework that you saw is captured by all of those. Many of you will be familiar and have seen kind of the keystone documents that come out of our long range and medium range efforts. The long range is our long range plan, Journey 2050. At that scale, you're really just kind of setting your aspirational plans. You're kind of defining your philosophical approach to how you want to provide service to the community. And then you transition to kind of the mid-year or mid-range horizon where you see our TDP. And that's really where you begin to define those key activities that will advance you towards your strategic priorities. So in our case, things like the gold line is a perfect example. That's something that's kind of captured in our mid-range efforts right now. And then you have really the day-to-day work, which is the short-range planning. And as you're aware, we have 4 service changes per year. And so that framework also applies to the activities that go in that process. Does a route's runtimes need to be refined? Does the boundary of a zip zone need to be slightly modified to capture a different destination? And so all of that work is occurring really at the same time to serve kind of these different time horizons and the priorities and work that's set within them. And so once we have started to form our goals, that's when we want to engage and really start gathering the information that will eventually lead to concrete solutions in the form of routes and zones. And so to do that, we really take a in-depth, both quantitative and qualitative process across a number of dimensions to understand community need. And so this gets back to some of the discussion earlier about understanding exactly where people live, where they need to go. We look to the communities themselves to understand what priorities they've set, how they would like to develop, where they're planning to develop. And ultimately, we look to our customers, both passive and actively, to provide direction on how they would like to see us invest in our resources. And so, just to touch some more on that last point, we have what we refer to as our voice of the customer toolkit. And that really runs the gamut of the level of engagement that we would have with our customers. And so, we receive on a daily basis passive feedback through something like our website, where there's always a form available. Anyone at any time can hop on and provide us feedback, to something that's very detailed and very tailored, like the community working groups that Jennifer was speaking about earlier, where we are engaging on a kind of a monthly basis with the eyes and ears, for lack of a better term, with the community to really help us hone in on the service that we're going to provide. And so through all of these different feedback mechanisms, really staff works to consolidate them down into priorities. What do these mean at like a high level? What are our community members trying to tell us is most important to them? What do they value? And then translate those into insights and actions. And so one of the important things too is, our customers aren't necessarily just community members. We get a lot of feedback from our operators, both I think on the zip side and the fixed route side, that provide us great insight into, how we should deliver service. A perfect example of that is, I think, last service change. It was something as simple as restructuring how some of the routes were organized at Linwood Transit Center because multiple operators had noticed based on wayfinding, based on passenger movement, that if we paired two routes next to each other, it would simplify the transfer process and save a lot of this kind of crosswalking across the center. And so it really comes to us in a whole host of different ways. And so, as we've gathered this information, it's then having to really translate it to actual paths that a bus follows or zones that zip cars operate in. That is the tangible product that we work to create. And I think this is where you start to see the greatest kind of maturation and how we provide and deliver service. Historically, we were a predominant fixed route provider that most agencies in the country were until the last decade. And so when we were going into an area and figuring out how do we provide service, we really had one tool to provide a response. That was fixed route bus. And fixed route bus does a lot of things great. There's not a better, you know, flexible service to provide or to move large amounts of people to common destinations quickly and on a routine basis than fixed route. But, as you go through your daily lives, you realize that there's a lot of trips you have to make yourself that the bus couldn't meet those needs. And that's where Zip comes in. And so, as Jennifer mentioned, those kind of coverage gaps exist in all types of communities. It's whether you're in an urban area or a rural area, there's a whole host of destinations that are difficult, frankly, to get to by fixed route service, either because the road network doesn't allow the bus to go down that path, or they just are origins or and destinations that just aren't common. They don't necessarily have the demand that would regularly warrant a large vehicle like a bus to travel. And so it's recognizing the differences, the strengths and weaknesses of each of these that our two teams have been working to define and hone in on as we think about how we'll present service in the future. And so to make that a little bit more tangible, we're going to, the next couple slides, go through a few examples. At the macro level, really a good illustration of this concept is kind of the Mukilteo-Linwood connection. So both of those cities have major destinations that generate all-day demand. So in Mukilteo, you have the ferry terminal. Every 30 minutes, you have a ferry that can be filled with 500 plus individuals that are either coming to Snohomish County or leaving Snohomish County. Then you have Linwood with all its commercial destinations and link that will get you to the greater metropolitan area. And so, that's where a route like the 117 comes in. That's the green line on the map. It provides fast all-day service between these two destinations that is as competitive, frankly, travel-wise with a car. And there's the demand to support that. But as you can see from the green line, that speed has the trade-off of, if you live off the speedway and you're in the more neighborhood area, access is more challenging. And so to provide that kind of regional connection, that's where we have routes that are less direct, like the 103. It will also connect this area that's 8, 10, 12 miles in distance apart. But it does that through a longer trip, and it snakes through those neighborhoods. But then ultimately, once you get to Linwood, you can see there's micro pockets that those two routes can't get you to. And, as illustrated in some of the information that was shared earlier, where we're seeing, almost a quarter of ZIP passengers moving between the bus, it's that kind of synergy and connection of overlaying fixed route with ZIP that provides that kind of complementary access expanding function that we're trying to achieve by pairing these two services together. And so at even a more micro level, there's a tremendous amount of complementary interplay between the two modes. So 2 service changes ago, or maybe it was a couple more than that, when ZIP and Lake Stevens was being formed, one of the observations that we've had, or one of the areas that we've long wanted to serve, is the 83rd corridor between Marysville and Lake Stevens. That's one of the most fastest developing residential areas in the area, frankly. One of our historic concerns about doing that was the walking distance for transit customers to the Walmart at the intersection of 64th and 9 and State Route 9 would become too long for perhaps some customers to make that journey. But fortunately, with the launch of ZIP, we were able to add a satellite area to that zone, which allowed us to then move the Route 209 over to 83rd. And so you have now fixed route service on a corridor where it makes more sense. You have residential demand all day, 7 days a week. But we still can provide coverage to the Walmart, which was busy, but it had ebbs and flows of demand. And in doing this, because it's part of the Lake Stevens zip zone, we also actually just opened up really the amount of individuals in the community that could use transit to get to this commercial destination. So, these 2 examples really show how the modes can work together, both from a kind of a system-wide global scale to a very just even neighborhood scale. And so, what you saw were already like 2 defined solutions, but as we are kind of going through many iterations of designs and ideations, generally there's a whole host of possibilities. Does a route go down 83rd, or does it go down 84th or 85th? And so another area where I think we've been able to grow a lot is the level of sophistication we're bringing to evaluating the consequences of our choices. And so this is just a very kind of simplified example of the analysis that we do, showing some of the core functions. So, we do look at things like cost per rider and how does the composition of service across scenarios vary in that element. We also examine what are the equity impacts of the scenarios under consideration. And so, admittedly, there is both an art and a science component to this. It's not completely a numbers game, but we are increasingly, I think, becoming more clear in our thinking and more codified in how we are making and reaching decisions. And so one very important component that really hasn't been touched on is it's as you enter this stage where you start thinking of all of the components that go into the complete journey that makes up the trip. It's one thing to put lines on a map. It's another thing to actually ensure that individuals feel comfortable walking to those lines on the map, that once they're there, they feel safe. there's also the component of just wayfinding and signage. Are we providing apps that people intuitively understand to book trips on Zip or to plan trips on Fixed Route? And so just the graphic on the upper right is illustrates a very like micro example of the kind of nuanced decision making that we go through. So some of the most common trips on Fixed Route involve a transfer. Our goal is to try to make those as easy as possible. And so, you'd want the stops to be as close as possible. At those stops, we also want to provide shelters to minimize exposure to the elements. But, there's regulations on how close visual obstructions can be to an intersection. And so, to satisfy those obstructions, that introduces trade-offs on walking time and distance. And so, looking at that may prompt us to switch service to a different roadway that allows stops to be closer. So, there's a lot that goes into ensuring that the whole journey is satisfactory than just necessarily some of the planning work that was shown in prior stages. There's a big capital component to it as well. So and then this is the last step, but really it feeds a feedback loop that kind of feeds back into the first step. But after we've landed on a solution and have begun to implement it, that's when we get into monitoring the actual performance of our choices and determine whether modifications need to be made. And again, a lot of that looks similar to the efforts that we go through in step 2 and defining community needs. And so you have this qualitative component that's, illustrated on the left of like, well, what has the wait time been in zip zones? How is ridership performance doing to, on the right side, continuing to hear that voice of the community. So this is an example where after we launched weekend service on the Route 121, the first trip was at 5 a.m. or excuse me, 5:05. We received a call from a customer that said, hey, if you shifted this 5 minutes early and then we left at 5, this would allow me to make a connection to get to my job at time. And so, you have global performance, which kind of comes through like the ridership trends and whatnot. But then you also have this ongoing kind of micro performance that you receive from customers on a regular basis. And so, as we kind of reach the conclusion of this overview, really in terms of next steps, we will continue to implement the 2024 and beyond plan, but then we are starting to outline a roadmap of kind of next steps and what work that combines Fixed Route and microtransit looks like. And so we hope to come back to the board in a couple months to provide some more information on that. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Any questions of Matthew? See if anybody online? All right, Tom. Councilmember Merrill, do you have one?
No, that's a lot to take in.
Yeah. All right. Councilmember Araya?
Thank you. Just one question about the service hours. Is fall of 23 your base year for those percentages?
In terms of, are we offering more service hours than previously?
Yeah, you mentioned that before the pandemic, and then there was 100 or there was a percentage increase. And I was curious, what is the base year for the increase? Is that fall of 23?
The increase relative is based on 2019.
Oh, okay.
And then the actual growth of 100,000 hours is based on the low period of the pandemic.
Thank you.
Councilmember Matsumoto Wright.
Thank you. So, light rail starts at 5 a.m. And then do all of our routes start at 5 a.m. or some earlier than that?
Some start earlier, a few start later. Generally, matching bus service to rail is one of the items that we have been working on, particularly with Swift. That's kind of the backbone of our network. But there is continued alignment that we'll be working on as we add service in the future.
That might be something that Zip will be better at. But if, because if you have a 8 o'clock flight and you have to be there 2 hours early and it takes you over an hour to get there on light rail, plus you have to then walk across the whole parking lot to get to the check-in. I think a lot of people with the early flights are just not using light rail. Maybe they are, but from Linwood, I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can get more people to use it. And so that's feeding it with community transit somehow.
I do think that Sound Transit, as they have additional operating base options, are looking to start service earlier, because I've run into that challenge myself of trying to get to the airport for a very early flight using Link, but I'm not sure at this time there's any firm plans, unfortunately, where Link would say start at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. I've not heard that, but I will say that Sound Transit, though, does recognize this need and is considering. I think they presented to their board for or will be doing it in March, a night owl service that allows them to do the necessary maintenance on Link while still providing those regional connections. And I think there may be an opportunity through that service to fill that need.
Well, I'm glad we're thinking about it and actually doing something in the future. Thank you.
Right. And thinking about airports, we have Payne Field. That's not too far from the ferry, and Zip would be really handy to go from one to the other. And just throw that out there. You guys hadn't thought about that. So other than you gave us an example, which I think is great, being able to be flexible when you put those boundaries in for the Zip, especially on the pilot program, and you showed because of Walmart, right, and getting people. Has there been other kind of adaptation, however we want to say it, of whether it's Alderwood or Arlington, Darrington?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. No, that's specifically the first kind of like, as Matthew referenced, kind of hub or destination outside of a main boundary. And it has proven to like be working really well. Like, I think it's drawing people that may have been taking the bus prior to the route changing, but it's also created an option for people who are in Lake Stevens to access Walmart in a way that, maybe they were driving there themselves or weren't able to get to it. So we're hoping that based on that learning, if there's other areas that seems like it would be really applicable to, then we'd be like, oh, well, we've done that before. It worked well. Let's try it again here. So it was really designed in the spirit of the pilot to see how it would work. But it is a common design element of microtransit to have satellite hubs outside of major zones for that particular reason, because it's not as efficient to create the boundary to encompass that. It just stretches it out too much, but to be able to hop to it and back is really efficient.
That's certainly an airport, a ferry, a major Alderwood Mall, what have you. Yeah, that's something like that. A lot of people are going to. Just curious, you guys know roughly within not just our region, but maybe nationally, what percentage of the transit agencies are doing the microtransit? Is this, I mean, it's new to us, but
That's a good question. I do not know exactly like a percent. I do find it is rapidly increasing, and we're also seeing what the industry calls commingling of paratransit and microtransit together. So one operator being able to serve both customer types in the service, whether it's a microtransit trip or a paratransit trip. So that could be something interesting to explore at some point as well.
Maybe
Just-
we could do another transit conference. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely seeing it more at the
Yes.
conferences and that kind of stuff. And lastly, if I was to, or somebody was to get on the Zip, and you want to be dropped off at, and we'd hope to have more than 24%, but people actually trying to catch another connection with transit, will they drop you off right at the bus stop?
As long as it's safe. So that's the instructions that,
Because when you were talking earlier, I was wondering, that would be handy.
yeah, we do have customers that deboard at actual like flagged bus stops. They're not always at transit centers. And so as long as it's safe for the driver to be able to pull off, both for the driver and for the customer, then that's allowed.
Yeah. Can you think if the bus can stop? I mean, they take up more room than the car.
We don't want them
but-
stopping in active travel lanes, but if you think about like spots around, Alderwood Mall, for instance, there's like bus stops around there that someone could put that in as a destination if they wanted to try and if it was, just has to be safe.
And I would assume most of your 24% that is going to transit is probably things like the Linwood Transit Center or.
A
right?
lot of them are at transit centers, like Arlington, like Stevens, it's at the transit centers that most of those connections are happening.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions or any?
Yes.
Yeah. Councilman Romero.
There, last, I don't know, 15 years, there's been a lot of opportunities, a lot of services set up for moving people around. You've got Uber, you got Lyft, you got the transportation districts. And the area that I'm actually paying most attention to right now is moving seniors and people with medical things like that. So is there any crossover, any work, any coordination going on with at least looking at some of the insurance options that people have for an Uber to say, I think United Health has an option where a senior can engage in also having an insurance coverage for transportation to certain places. And of course, Uber and Lyft all fit in there. And then our paratransit is that. And it seems like there's the possibility of many silos forming up around there. But if our big goal is to move people where they need to be, is there any amount of coordination or cross discussion, I mean, among people, any of the agencies, public, private, municipal, going on saying, what all we got and how would we get that all to coordinate?
Well, it's my learning for today. I didn't realize that was even an option through insurance companies, so that's great to know.
Yeah, Humana does it as well.
Yeah.
I'm in that market, so I know.
Well, I was gonna have a conversation with you.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there are spaces where agencies are trying to get together to be more creative and think outside the box of how to be able to plan travel more effectively for all the different audiences. I think it's, like I said, one of the examples I gave was kind of just how can we create a better service for people who may be paratransit eligible, but they need to not have to schedule their trip 24 hours ahead of time. So a service like microtransit could work, and that's where that kind of commingling part comes in. So I think there's elements that are happening that agencies are trying to think more holistically. I think more to your question, a great goal would be to try to have a forum that's both like public transportation providers and private transportation providers and some other like big medical type industries that can come together and think really creatively. So let me know if you find any of that. I'm always interested. But yeah, like I think I think as just the disruption, which I say in a positive way, of TNCs like Uber and Lyft created over a decade ago, forced transportation in general to start thinking about how they deliver service, how we deliver service to communities. And I think exactly what you're describing, Will, is already happening in pockets and will, I think, more broadly be happening. And hopefully someday those are things that we can explore even at community transit.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, obviously it was a good, it generated lots of questions, and I think the board continues to be very excited about microtransit and its and where it's going next, actually, is another excitement thing.
We'll make
All
a
right.
concluding remark before we
Absolutely.
move to board communication. I kind of feeling a need to stick the landing a little bit here. And I was trying to think of an analogy. We've either dished up a nice platter of spinach or we pulled the curtain back on the sausage making. I'm not sure which. It's one or the other, but Matthew showed a slide up there with a simulated evaluation matrix showing a bunch of different criteria and ratings. And so it's our hope to bring back to the board, you know, over time, a series of scenarios where we're looking at experimental blending of fixed route service improvements combined with microtransit, new microtransit zones to be able to show you what expected performance we might see in those various different scenarios, and then use those to inform decision making about the future network. So that's what you can expect to see next. The question you raised, Councilmember Merrill, is an interesting one. You know, at the end of the day, it comes back to cost and, you know, what resources do we have available? What can we afford? And given that, what is our ability to meet our customers' needs? And Jennifer flagged, you know, 18 to 20 bucks a trip. When you think about Uber and Lyft, 18 to 20 bucks sounds about right as far as what a typical Uber or Lyft trip might cost you. We're delivering that trip for the price of the bus fare, and we're subsidizing the balance. So thinking about the question, you know, what medical transport coverage might look like for a cabulance trip, for example, that's probably a wholly different cost model, right? So one of our goals here is to come back to you with the most efficient blending of these services that reflects what we think we can sustain financially over time and leverage optimal performance. And that's where the art and the science meet. And so I'm looking forward to that journey. There's probably gonna be a lot more conversations like this before we get there and get clarity around it. But
I would imagine our DART costs are considerably higher, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So as many of you can go to Zip instead of that helps as well.
In theory,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to offer those observations at the end of the conversation and set expectations about where we head next with this.
Very good. All right. I guess we're at comments. I would just like to thank you both very much. I'll hurry up and zip through this. I just want to, yes, we'll get used to those. I just want to say, very happy to be back here, continue to be not only on the board, but as the chair for the next year. And we have exciting things ahead, as Rick has announced, good things coming. And it really kind of a different, it's a really probably the most change in one time I think I've seen on the board. Not that good and bad, right? I mean, it's not a bad thing; it's good. But we'll miss some of the history that we had, and some of the board members are no longer with us. Just a big welcome to Councilmember Parshall and to Councilmember Payne and Councilmember Matsumoto Wright. And I know you've been as a alternate really involved for a long time. So I look back at you've been here a long time, even though you're new to the board. So it's great to have that experience. So with that, anybody else? Let's see who I'll just go right down the list here. Council Member Dunn,
No comments, thank you.
Council Member Merrill,
No comments.
Mayor Naring.
Really good presentation. Interesting to hear your thoughts on that 83rd corridor, and you're absolutely right. That is we're living in it. We're even shocked at how much development is going on up there, and the more service we can provide, the better. So that was good to hear. Thank you for that. And yeah, kind of piggybacking on what the chair said, it's great to see how active our alternates are. It's great to see some alternates get a chance to move on to the board, and then we have alternates at almost every meeting. So thank you.
Great. Councilmember Payne.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember, is it partial or partial?
I've been saying this all day. It's just like Marshall, but with the P, so it's partial, like partial credit.
I will partially get it right.
Yeah.
Councilmember Partial.
Yeah. I just want to thank staff today. I kind of feel like a real board member today because we had our first finance committee meeting, and staff did a fantastic job. I'm just in sponge mode right now, kind of speaking to Chair Marine's comments about we have new blood, and that means a lot of learning for me. And so I'm taking it all in, and staff's doing a great job. And this was a fantastic presentation today. So I would just thank everybody for their welcomes, and thank staff for being patient with me as I absorb everything they have to share. Thank you.
Mayor Roberts.
No, just that it's good information. Thank you. It's nice to slow it all down and listen well. So thank you for the presentation today.
Councilmember Matsumoto, right?
I think I've spoken enough today.
No, never enough. Never enough. Councilmember Araya.
No other comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We don't really call it. Councilmember Gallagher. All right. And Mayor Vanny? No? And I don't think we have meat on. All right. So. Oh, okay. All right, Councilmember Perkin. Or labor rep, I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's okay. No, it was a lot of really good information. Thank you. A lot to digest.
Yeah, I didn't mean to degrade her position there to labor rep to council member, but
Nothing, don't take it that way.
yeah. All right. We have no executive session today. Any other additional business we should be doing? Okay, then we are adjourned.
All right. One down.